Morning!
Madnin!
Welcome to the India Explained podcast, recorded in London and San Francisco. One take, unscripted, no rehearsal. Good afternoon, Bunty. Greetings from San Francisco. What's up at your end of the world?
Everything's fantastic, Rohit. We are slightly recovering from a terrorist attack, so people are slightly kind of sad, and rightly so. But other than that, things are fine. Things are fine.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, and it seems that people in London have responded in just a sort of wonderful way, in a way that completely challenges the worldview of these ISIS people, the terrorists who committed the attack. Meanwhile, at our end in India, things continue to be the same. Cow-related violence, vindictive government.
Cow-related violence.
Cow violence. And the BJP government, true to its reputation, has turned out to be very vindictive. I think that's the big story in the news, which is that there have been some raids on CBI raids on Prannoy Roy's residence and the NDTV offices. I don't know the exact details, but they've been on some very flimsy grounds, which was that agreement between two parties was renegotiated, and the interest rate was brought down, and that is being interpreted as some kind of major tax avoidance. So before we proceed further, let's maybe just turn things over to our man on the ground, Ayush Soni, who will give us a 1-minute take on what's been going on.
So it's been 2 days since Prannoy Roy and Radhika Roy, founders of NDTV, were raided by the CBI in a case, of causing a loss to ICICI Bank on a loan they had borrowed. And the media coverage is very, very telling. Arun Shourie asked journalists to stand by each other in these difficult times, but looking at how the media has covered this, it doesn't seem to be happening. Other than the Tribune, the Wire, and today the Indian Express, not a single newspaper has put out an editorial slamming the government for misusing the CBI. And it just made me wonder if something like this were to happen under a Congress government, how media organizations in India would have reacted.
So, my thoughts on this one, Rohit. NDTV occupies a really powerful space in the middle class mindset in India. It was seen as, when it started in the Guys of the World this week, it was seen as a kind of a safe haven for English-speaking Jeeves and Wooster reading types, right? It was more than just a television channel. It signaled a certain type of life, aspiration, and wanting to be. And I remember, because at that time the only thing that was going on television was the Doordarshan bulletins.
Right.
And NDTV came through like a breath of, at that point again, it wasn't NDTV, it was The World This Week. It came through as a breath of fresh air because
sorry to interrupt, which is a show that Prannoy Roy and I believe Radhika Roy, which is a show that was commissioned by Doordarshan, and it's something that they used to do for Doordarshan, right? And if I remember correctly, every Friday evening there would be a 30-minute
Correct. That's how it started. That's how it started.
Right.
And that is so right. That's how it started. And then in parallel to that, Prannoy Roy discovered this, he was good at calling elections, right? So not calling elections, you know what I mean? This is, doing opinion polls and exit polls, and he became a champion of doing that kind of commentary around elections. So that 30-minute news slot and kind of a decent, English educated in the Indian context then, or English speaking, I don't know whether Prannoy Roy is from Doon or not, but he was from a very good hill school or something, a school in the hills where there was boardings. And so that heady mixture of speaking English in a particular way, looking outward at a time when foreign travel was very restricted, and then also doing, because the other thing that, all of us Indians have a fetish for is it's not just enough to speak well, but you have to say clever things. So he would do that convincingly because he would say clever things about the elections. Now, this is a very long-winded way of saying that NDTV has, since its inception, created a soft spot within the urban metropolitan elite in India. Now, that is the first baseline to put down.
So basically, what I'm hearing is that NDTV is the Shashi Tharoor of television channels in India.
You are absolutely right. It is, where or some of the other channels have, Govinda, Rajnikant type vibes, but it is, you're so right. That is such a brilliant way of putting it, Rohit. It is the Shashi Tharoor of television journalism, and so now with that as the baseline, you have a channel which forges a reputation of being neutral, and it's a channel for the Saab logs, the Saabs of the world. The people who run the establishment tune into NDTV with their whiskey soda, and because what has happened to the Saab logs, given that the English have gone, is they cannot quite identify with the BBC or the CNN, because for the large part those channels don't give a rat's ass about India, right?
Correct.
So then they are left to finding a poor cousin to that. And NDTV fills that gap brilliantly in the India of the 90s, late 80s, early 90s.
So basically, again, it's for the class that watches Downton Abbey, but, it watches Downton Abbey from the air of sort of watching it from the servant quarter, right?
Correct. And I think they do that, and I don't sit sufficiently close to the NDTV, the inside stories or anything, but this goes on for quite a while. But as is the style in any Indian enterprise, if somebody does something well, you'll have every monkey and his carpenter trying to copy it. Right? So before you know it, every two-bait gutka seller starts an English television channel. And there's this flourishing of journalism schools, and people who can speak English and hold a microphone, qualify as journalists, and then the tamasha begins. And what happens is this kind of, so NDTV in my mind is almost like the Chinese last emperor. It was keeping a watch over a kingdom that was declining. And let's look at Prannoy Roy as the last emperor. And it got swept over by a very untidy, clumsy, and actually popular uprising against it. Right? So all of the channels. Now, so that's my initial take on it. What do you think?
I think you're spot on. And, this is not to engage in a kind of, mutually congratulatory sort of exercise. Both of us are brilliant at analyzing this, but perhaps we've missed out something. But I think my own reading on the matter is very similar to what you say. That the point you mentioned at the end about the untidy and messy popular uprising, yes, and it's often expressed that uprising often takes a very ugly form in the way in which it's expressed, and one sees this nowhere more clearly than on Twitter, where the so-called bhakts, Modi acolytes, Modi fans, Hindu right-wing supporters, who are, people from across a range of social backgrounds, a much wider cross-section of society than the typical NDTV audience, I would say. Though still, of course, they don't include the really marginal subaltern populations of India. The kind of visceral loathing that they have for NDTV and for some NDTV journalists, particularly people like Barkha Dutt and so on, is actually sort of very alarming. It's very, very extreme that they associate NDTV with not just being a mouthpiece of the Congress party, but with being, the being the voice of a Latvians elite, and both the Congress and the Latvians elite are seen in the imagination of the Bhakt as deeply, deeply anti-national. I mean, the frightening thing for me is that when I see these sentiments on social media and the like, I don't think these people are actually just using these slurs as, anti-national, treasonous and all as mere sort of insults. They really do believe that, these channels, etc., are undermining a national cause and undermining the great sort of heroic figure of Modi. So then when Modi does something of this kind, or the Modi government, which is very clearly behind these raids, you get a kind of mass support for it. So it's been a long time coming, and I think in associating a kind of general anti-Latvians backlash, anti sort of small Delhi privileged circle of IAS, artistic, intellectual, India International Center people, that anger has kind of spilled over and taken onto NDTV. So from that perspective, it's kind of a political masterstroke on the part of Modi, I would say.
I think the one observation that I'd like to make is the NDTV, I would kind of make the case that it is not just a television channel. It is, and that's what I was trying to do in the upfront part of the discussion, that, it is kind of seen as a way of life, and
right.
It draws to it a set of values, and the values are well-educated, foreign returned, or familiar with the foreign, a kind of metropolitan ease, a person who's just as easy. So this is not the tourist who goes to Thailand or Sri Lanka. This is the person who goes to Vienna, is familiar with opera, can come back and hold his own. So I think what was brilliant, Rohit, was the Shashi Tharoor analogy that you used. Now, so cut to present, given that it's associated with a way of life, and that way of life is passing, or, kind of withering away, and that popular discourse or the media discourse is becoming, aggressive, kind of almost Banya-like. It's almost like an argument between people rather than trying to reason and understand what's going on. NDTV is kind of losing audience, and obviously in the way it's positioned as an opposition to the BJP, who see themselves as kind of, sons of the soil. And therefore the CBI jumping in what makes it murky is the fact that it could be seen as the government chasing down a corrupt media station. That's one read on it.
Yeah.
The other read could be the government being vindictive. So I do not know, and I don't know whether you know, whether we're familiar with the facts to make a pronouncement that, it is a corrupt channel which is being rightly chased down, which would be one view, or whether it's a channel that is being victimized for being honest, upright. And, we need to ensure in our commentary a balance, and that's what we want to do. So those are the two positions that we are kind of anchoring off.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would, and I think that we could have a sort of range of opinions about this. My own reading would be more, two points. So my own reading would be more towards the latter, because I think the kind of corruption that NDTV has engaged in is this sort of non-illegal corruption, or what may be called illegal corruption, which is, nepotism, favoritism, elitism, right? Those are not
right.
things that, those are not things that, until it's a very sort of clear case of discrimination, those are not things that are generally actionable in the Indian context. And, there's ample nepotism in every field. So a political party talking about nepotism, which is not really, but if it were to be giving that as a kind of excuse, that would be laughable. So, that's one point. The second thing, so legally what they have done, I mean, maybe it's not, perfectly, clean. Maybe there are ambiguities in there, but then that's true of Tehelka, that's true of Times of India, that's true of every organization. So that's one question. The second point is that I would say that one can oppose or be critical of the government action and the CBI raid without at the same time making NDTV out to be these sort of liberal paragons of virtue or free speech heroes. And that's my individual take on the matter.
Okay. I think, what do you think the government will gain if NDTV were to collapse as a news reporting organization? What do you think will happen? Because,
Sure.
uh,
So I would say that, two things. One is that one more potential source of opposition, no matter how mild, will be eradicated, because, NDTV also wasn't really taking on the government in any significant kind of way. It's just that compared to the way the India Today group, the Times of India group, Z, etc., were, had completely fallen in line with what the government wanted, compared to that, they seem to be standing out a little. So that's one thing. The second is it's signaling, it's sending a message to other people, so it produces a chilling effect. And the third is that it actually it just removes one other competitor from being in the way of Republic, which is Arnab Goswami's new channel. It's a complete out and out BJP channel. I mean, it got its license in 3 days, I was told. There's someone who's technically an independent MP, but, a defense contractor with allegedly all kinds of conflicts of interest who've backed it. There are these, deep-pocketed BJP politicians in Tamil Nadu who've invested in it and so on, and in some other South Indian states. So that, in my view, are the three main reasons. And Bunty, what would be your reasons? And then maybe we can move towards wrapping it up, because I think we've gone a little longer than our usual time on this episode.
okay. My last comment on this would be, I think the current Indian media channels, the different varieties, Times, Republic, etc., goes back to a very old kind of love story between one lady and two male news reporters. That is where it starts. So what we see in Indian media today is basically a glorified love story gone wrong. And I don't want to dwell on that on this episode, because we've kind of come to the last, but I think it's sufficient to let our listeners know that this Republic, Times, now all of the tamasha that is going on is basically because somebody couldn't get into somebody else's pants. And it is on that note I'd like to end.
All right. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, it's we're going down the realm of, I'd say, rumor and allegation, but it's possible that these backstories do influence events at a national and even a global level. Okay. All right, Bunty. So take care, man.
Take care. Bye bye.